The alarm woke Lisa Hoffman at 3 in the morning. She rolled out of bed in her small quarters at the Deep Space Monitoring Station and pulled on her uniform while still half asleep. Lisa had been working at the station for 2 years now, listening to the endless silence of space, recording background radiation and the occasional natural phenomenon. Nothing exciting ever happened out here on the edge of explored space. She made her way to the control room, coffee in hand, expecting to see another false alarm, or maybe a meteor shower. Instead, she found her night shift crew clustered around the main console, their faces pale and serious. "What's going on?" Lisa asked, setting down her coffee. Lieutenant Peter Grant looked up at her. His hands were shaking slightly. "Ma'am, you need to hear this. We picked up a transmission about 20 minutes ago. It's alien, but our translation software is working on it." Lisa felt her heart rate pick up. In all the years humanity had been exploring space, they had found ruins and evidence of other civilizations, but never an active signal. "Never contact with living aliens. Play it," she said. The computer speakers crackled to life. At first, Lisa heard only strange sounds like wind chimes mixed with bird calls. Then the translation software kicked in, and a voice began speaking in halting English. "This is Ilara Prime calling any civilization within range. We are under attack. Our world is dying. We have no weapons, no defense. The Krathel came without warning. They are burning our cities, killing our people. We do not know how to fight. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. We are a peaceful people. We have children. We have families. Please help us," the message repeated. Lisa listened 3 times, her coffee growing cold in her hand. She could hear the desperation in the alien voice even through the computer translation. Whoever was speaking was terrified. "How far away?" she asked quietly. 37 light years, Peter replied. "The message is about 6 weeks old based on transmission time. And the Krathel? Do we have information on them?" Another officer, a young woman named Karen Bell, pulled up a file on her screen. "Yes, ma'am. We've been tracking them for about 5 years. They're an aggressive empire species. Military-based society. They've conquered 12 worlds that we know of. Usually, they completely eliminate the native population or enslave them." Lisa stared at the star chart showing Ilara Prime's location. 37 light-years away, an entire civilization was being destroyed, and they had sent out a call for help to anyone who might be listening. "They sent this message to how many systems?" Lisa asked. 17, Peter said. "They're broadcasting in all directions, hoping someone will respond." Lisa made a decision. "Get me a direct line to Admiral Jake Morrison at Earth Command. Priority Alpha, and someone wake up the Secretary General." The next few hours moved quickly. Lisa sent the full recording and all their data back to Earth through the faster-than-light communication relay. She knew that what she had just set in motion would change everything. Humanity had been hiding in space, exploring quietly, avoiding attention from more established civilizations. Now they had to decide if they would stay hidden or step into the light. On Earth, in the Unified Government headquarters in Geneva, President Helen Carter listened to the recording 5 times. Around the table sat military leaders, diplomats, scientists, and representatives from every major nation. The debate started immediately. "We should not get involved," argued one diplomat. "We barely understand galactic politics. The Krathel might turn their attention to Earth if we interfere." "We have a moral obligation," countered another voice. "These people are dying. They're asking for help." Admiral Jake Morrison spread his hands on the table. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady eyes. He had fought in the last of Earth's wars before the unified government was formed. He knew what combat meant. "Let me be clear about what we're discussing," Jake said. "If we respond to this call, we will be going to war. The Krathel won't just leave because we ask nicely. We'll have to fight them and people will die. Our people. Do we have the capability?" President Carter asked. Jake nodded slowly. "We've been building our fleet for 20 years, preparing for the possibility of hostile contact. We have good ships, well-trained crews, and weapons that have been tested in simulations. Could we defeat the Krathel force at Ilara Prime? Probably. But it won't be clean and it won't be easy." A military officer named General Frank Cooper leaned forward. "There's another consideration. Humanity has spent 10,000 years fighting each other. We know war in ways that most species don't. We've studied every battle, every tactic, every strategy in human history. We've made weapons that can destroy entire cities. We know how to be brutal and efficient." "That's not something to be proud of," someone said. "No," Frank agreed. But it's a tool we have, and maybe it's time we use that tool for something good instead of against each other. The discussion went on for hours. Some argued for isolation and safety. Others argued for intervention and morality. Finally, President Carter called for silence. "I've been thinking about my grandmother," she said quietly. "She lived through the last World War. She told me stories about watching the news, seeing people suffering in other countries and feeling helpless. She said the worst feeling in the world was having the power to help, but choosing to do nothing." Helen looked around the table at each person. Humanity has been alone in the dark for so long. We've been afraid of what's out there, but now someone is calling for help, and we have the power to answer. What does it say about us if we choose to stay hidden? "It says we're smart," one diplomat argued. "It says we're cautious." "Or it says we're cowards," Helen replied. "We spent centuries learning how to destroy each other. Every horror, every weapon, every brutal tactic. We got very good at violence. Maybe it's time we use that knowledge to protect instead of to conquer." She stood up. "I'm authorizing a military response. Admiral Morrison, prepare the fleet. We're going to Alara Prime." The room erupted in argument again, but Helen had made her decision. Within hours, orders went out to naval bases across Earth's solar system. Ships that had been on patrol were recalled. Crews that had been training were mobilized. Supplies were loaded, weapons were checked, and battle plans were drawn up. Captain Ben Walker received his orders while his ship, the ESS Valiant, was conducting routine maneuvers near Jupiter. He read the message twice, then called his senior staff to the bridge. "We've received deployment orders," he told them. "We're going to war." His crew was silent for a moment. Then his executive officer, a woman named Julie Price, asked the obvious question. "Against who?" "An empire species called the Krathul. They're attacking a peaceful civilization that asked for help. Earth is responding." "How long until we leave?" asked another officer. 12 hours. We rendezvous with the main fleet at Mars, then we jump to Alara Prime." Ben looked at each of his crew members. "I want everyone to understand what this means. We're not going on a patrol. We're not going to explore. We're going to fight, and some of us might not come back." No one spoke for a long moment. Then Julie straightened up. "Then we better make sure we win, sir." Across Earth and throughout the solar system, the same scene was playing out on dozens of ships. Thousands of men and women were preparing for humanity's first real war among the stars. They checked their equipment, wrote letters home, and tried not to think too hard about what was coming. At the monitoring station, Lisa Hoffman prepared the response message. She had worked with linguists to create something the Valenti would understand. When it was ready, she sent it out across the void of space aimed at Alara Prime. The message was simple. "Message received, Valenti. Earth is coming. Hold on." 37 light-years away, the signal would travel at the speed of light, taking decades to arrive. But humanity wouldn't wait that long. Their ships could cross the distance in weeks using faster-than-light drives. The response would arrive long before the message did. In the cold darkness of space, 27 warships gathered at Mars. They were sleek and deadly, built with the accumulated knowledge of human conflict. Each ship carried weapons that had been designed by a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of destruction. But for the first time in human history, those weapons weren't pointed at other humans. They were being sent to protect someone else. The monsters of Earth were going to war, and they were fighting on the side of the innocent. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship and gave the order. "All ships prepare for jump. Destination, Alara Prime. Let's go save some lives." The fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel, racing toward a world they had never seen, to fight for people they had never met. The cry for help had gone out into the darkness, and humanity had answered. Commander Zethrak stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the burning city below through the viewport. The conquest of Alara Prime was proceeding exactly as planned. The Valenti had offered no resistance worth mentioning. They had no military, no weapons, no understanding of warfare at all. It was almost disappointing how easy this invasion had been. "Commander, the ground forces report the capital city is secure," his tactical officer reported. "Minimal casualties on our side. The native population is being rounded up for processing." Zethrak clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. Processing meant separating the useful ones who could work from the ones who would be eliminated. The Krathul had perfected this system over a dozen conquered worlds. It was efficient and effective. "Excellent. Begin resource extraction operations." I want the valuable minerals identified and ready for transport within 3 days. The Krathul had been the dominant military power in this region of space for over a century. They were strong, disciplined, and confident in their superiority. No one had ever successfully resisted them. A few species had tried, but the Krathul war machine always prevailed. "Sir, I'm detecting something unusual," the sensor operator said suddenly. His voice carried a note of confusion. "What is it?" Zethrak asked, not particularly concerned. "Probably just some debris or a natural phenomenon. Energy signatures at the edge of the system. Multiple contacts. They just emerged from faster-than-light travel." Zethrak moved to the sensor station. "Another species? Probably coming to negotiate or offer tribute once they see we've claimed this world. Send them our standard warning. Tell them this system is now Krathul territory." But as he watched the sensor display, something felt wrong. The ships weren't approaching slowly or broadcasting peaceful intentions. They were moving into formation, spreading out in a pattern that looked almost like, "Commander, they're not responding to our warnings," the communications officer said. "They're jamming our long-range communications." "Battle formation," the tactical officer said, his voice rising. "Sir, they're taking up battle formation." Zethrak felt a chill run through his body. "How many ships?" 27 vessels. Various sizes. Designs unknown. "Not in our database. Power up weapons," Zethrak ordered. "Prepare for combat. Send a message to the approaching fleet. Tell them they have one chance to retreat before we destroy them." On the bridge of the ESS Valiant, Captain Ben Walker watched the Krathul fleet on his tactical display. 15 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, and a command carrier. They were arranged in a standard defensive pattern around the planet. It was exactly what the intelligence reports had predicted. "Looks like they're trying to hail us," his communications officer said. "Ignore it," Ben replied calmly. "All fighters launch. Execute Attack Plan Alpha." From the hangar bays of all 27 human ships, small fighter craft began pouring out like angry wasps from a disturbed nest. Within minutes, over 300 fighters were screaming toward the Krathul fleet. "Sir, they're powering weapons," reported Lieutenant Julie Price from her station. "Good, let them waste time targeting our fighters. Missile batteries, prepare to fire on my mark." The Krathul had fought many battles, but always against other capital ships, fleet versus fleet, with ships trading fire at long range until one side was destroyed or retreated. It was the civilized way of conducting space warfare. Every species they had encountered fought this way. They had never encountered fighter craft before. "What are those things?" The Krathul tactical officer shouted as hundreds of small contacts swarmed toward them. "They're too small to be real ships. Point defense systems, engage them," Zethrak ordered. The Krathul ships opened fire with their close-range defensive weapons designed to shoot down missiles and torpedoes. But human fighters were fast and agile, piloted by humans who had trained for years in combat simulation. They dodged and weaved, spreading out to attack from multiple angles. "They're getting through," the tactical officer screamed. "They're targeting our weapons arrays and sensor pods." Fighter pilot Danny Hayes rolled his craft hard to avoid incoming fire, laughing as he lined up his shot. He had been flying simulators since he was 12 years old, playing combat games and training programs. Now he was doing it for real and his blood was singing with adrenaline. Fox 3, he called out, launching missiles at a Krathul cruiser. Around him, dozens of other pilots were doing the same. The missiles weren't individually powerful enough to destroy a capital ship, but they didn't need to be. They targeted specific systems, sensors, communication arrays, weapon mounts. On the Valiant, Ben watched the battle unfold exactly as planned. Missile batteries fire. All tubes. From every human ship, hundreds of missiles launched simultaneously. Not the small fighter missiles, but massive ship killers, each carrying either high-explosive warheads or tactical nuclear devices. The Krathul point defense systems, already overwhelmed by the fighter attack, couldn't possibly stop them all. The first Krathul cruiser died in a blinding flash of light as 3 nuclear missiles hit it within seconds of each other. The ship simply came apart, breaking into pieces that tumbled away into space. "Direct hit on enemy cruiser," Julie reported. "Target destroyed. Good. All ships advance. Railguns begin firing. Let's not give them time to reorganize." The human fleet moved forward aggressively, closing the range. From their railgun batteries, solid metal slugs were accelerated to incredible speeds. The Krathul had energy shields that could deflect beam weapons. But they had never developed defense against simple, kinetic projectiles moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Zethrak watched in growing horror as another of his cruisers was torn apart by railgun fire. "Return fire! All ships target the lead enemy vessels." The Krathul ships began firing their main weapons, powerful energy beams that could slice through armor. But the human ships were moving in patterns that made no sense, never staying in one place, constantly shifting formation. And their point defense systems were shooting down the Krathul missiles with frightening accuracy. "How are they doing this?" Zethrak demanded. "They fight like they've been preparing specifically to counter our tactics." What he didn't know was that humans had been studying the Krathul for 5 years, analyzing every battle report they could find, learning their patterns and preferences. Human military analysts had wargamed dozens of scenarios looking for weaknesses, and they had found plenty. "Sir, the destroyer squadron is attempting to flank them," the tactical officer reported with hope in his voice. "Finally, some initiative. Support them with—" He never finished the sentence. The space where he was sending his destroyers suddenly erupted with explosions. Mines. The humans had deployed them during their initial approach, seeding the battlefield with hidden weapons. 2 destroyers were destroyed instantly. A third was badly damaged and tumbling out of control. "They mined the flanking routes," the tactical officer whispered in disbelief. "How did they know we would go that way?" "Because humans had spent thousands of years fighting humans, the smartest and most unpredictable enemy imaginable. They knew how to think ahead, to predict, to set traps. Every trick that had ever been used in naval warfare on Earth was being applied here, adapted for space combat." Captain Ben Walker allowed himself a small smile. "Target their command carrier. All remaining missiles. Let's cut the head off this snake." "Sir, they're trying to retreat," Julie reported. 3 cruisers are breaking formation and attempting to escape. Let them go. Focus on the carrier and the ship still in formation. We need to break their will to fight." Another wing of human fighters swept in low, targeting the carrier's engine section. The massive ship was powerful but slow. It had never been designed to fight off swarms of small, fast attackers. "Engine damage on the carrier," Julie reported. "They're losing power." On the Krathul flagship, alarms were blaring throughout every deck. Damage reports were coming in faster than they could be processed. Nearly half the fleet was destroyed or disabled, and the enemy ships were barely scratched. "All ships, full retreat," Zethrak ordered, his pride crumbling. "We cannot win this battle. Signal the ground forces to evacuate." "Sir, our communications are still being jammed." "We can't reach the ground forces." Zethrak slumped in his command chair. His fleet was broken. His reputation was destroyed. And he still didn't understand what had just happened. Who are these aliens who fought with such vicious creativity? "New contacts," the sensor operator shouted. "More enemy ships arriving from faster than light." But these weren't warships. They were troop carriers and landing craft. Ben had held them back, waiting for the space battle to be decided. Now they were moving toward the planet, ready to deal with the Krathul ground forces. "All ships, secure orbit," Ben ordered. "Begin landing operations. Marines, you're clear to go. Let's finish this." Below on Alara Prime, Krathul ground troops were receiving confusing reports. Something was happening in orbit, but they couldn't get clear information. Their commanders were trying to contact the fleet but getting no response. Then the human dropships began descending through the atmosphere like falling meteors, and the ground war began. A Valenti civilian named Elrin huddled in the basement of what had once been his home. Above him, he could hear the sounds of battle. Major Kelly Price hit the ground running as her dropship's doors opened. Around her, 200 Marines deployed in perfect formation, spreading out to secure the landing zone. The air smelled of smoke and something else, something alien. In the distance, she could see the ruins of what had once been a beautiful city. "Second platoon, secure the perimeter. First platoon, with me. We're moving to grid point 7. Intelligence says there's a concentration of Krathul forces there," Kelly ordered into her radio. Her Marines moved quickly through the rubble. They had trained for urban combat in a dozen different environments back on Earth. Every ruined building was potential cover. Every street corner was a possible ambush point. But they knew how to use it all to their advantage. Sergeant Chris Bailey led his squad through what looked like it had been a market district. Colorful fabric still hung from some stalls, now torn and burned. Bodies lay in the streets, the Valenti civilians who had been caught in the invasion. Chris felt anger building in his chest, but he pushed it down. Anger made you sloppy. He needed to stay sharp. "Contact front," whispered Private Kate Morris, who was on point. She held up a closed fist and the entire squad froze. Through his helmet display, Chris could see what Kate's sensors were picking up. 20 Krathul soldiers moving in formation down the main street. They were good troops, disciplined and alert. But they were moving in a standard patrol pattern, following military doctrine that probably worked fine against other conventional forces. Humans didn't fight conventionally. Chris made quick hand signals. Half his squad melted into the ruins on the left side of the street. The other half disappeared into buildings on the right. Within seconds, 12 highly trained Marines had vanished completely, leaving no trace they had ever been there. The Krathul patrol walked right into the kill zone. Chris waited until they were perfectly positioned, then spoke one word into his radio. Now, the ambush was devastating and over in seconds. The Marines fired from multiple directions at once, from positions the Krathul hadn't even considered checking. The alien soldiers tried to return fire, tried to find cover, but they were surrounded and outmaneuvered. Within 30 seconds, it was over. Clear, Kate reported, checking the bodies. All targets down. Good, collect their weapons and any intelligence. We need to know their communications frequencies and command structure. Chris looked at the carnage and felt nothing. These soldiers had been killing civilians for weeks. He saved his sympathy for the Valenti. A few blocks away, Lieutenant Amanda Cole was setting up a command post in a partially intact building. She had maps spread out on a makeshift table, showing the city layout and known Krathul positions. Reports are coming in from all squads, her communications specialist said. The Krathul are disorganized. They're not coordinating their response. I think they lost contact with their fleet. Amanda nodded. That was the advantage of the space battle happening first. The Krathul ground forces were cut off from their command structure, operating blind. Meanwhile, human forces had perfect coordination through their satellite network that had been deployed as soon as they secured orbit. Tell all units to keep pushing. I want continuous pressure on their positions. Don't give them time to regroup or establish a defensive line. This was a tactic humans had learned the hard way through centuries of warfare. Keep the enemy off balance. Never let them rest or reorganize. Push, push, push until they break. A Krathul commander named Vector crouched behind a collapsed wall, trying to make sense of the situation. His radio was filled with panicked reports from units across the city. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere. They appeared, attacked, and vanished before you could respond. They used weapons that fired from impossible angles. They seemed to know where his troops would be before they got there. Sir, we need orders, one of his subordinates said. Should we fall back to the command center? Vector wanted to say yes, wanted to retreat to a fortified position where they could make a stand. But every time his forces tried to retreat, the enemy seemed to anticipate it. They would find ambushes waiting on the withdrawal routes. It was like fighting ghosts who could read minds. We hold here, he finally said, though he didn't believe they could. Establish defensive positions and wait for support from the fleet. But no support was coming. The fleet was gone, destroyed or scattered. The Krathul ground forces just didn't know it yet. In another part of the city, Sergeant Nina Costa's squad had a different mission. They weren't hunting Krathul soldiers. They were searching for survivors. Hello? Nina called out in Valenti, using the translation device built into her helmet. We're here to help. We won't hurt you. A section of rubble shifted and a small face peered out. It was a Valenti child, maybe 8 years old by human standards. The child's feathers were dirty and matted and its eyes were huge with fear. Nina knelt down slowly, making herself less threatening. She removed her helmet so the child could see her face. Hey there. It's okay. You're safe now. The bad guys are leaving. Are you going to kill us too? The child whispered. The question hit Nina like a punch. No, sweetheart, never. We're here to protect you. Are there others with you? The child nodded and called out in its own language. More faces appeared from hiding spots. Adults, more children, elderly Valenti. They looked starved and terrified. Cooper, call it in, Nina said to one of her squad members. We need medical support and food. Lots of food. Within minutes, human medics arrived with supplies. They began treating the wounded and handing out emergency rations. The Valenti watched in confusion. These armored warriors who fought so viciously were being gentle with them, offering food and medicine. I don't understand, one adult Valenti said to Nina. Why are you helping us? What do you want from us? Nina looked at the alien, thinking about how to explain. We heard you calling for help, so we came. That's all. But you don't know us. We have nothing to offer you. You don't need to offer us anything, Nina said simply. Helping people who need it is just what we do, or what we're trying to do anyway. Back at the command post, Major Kelly Price was reviewing reports from across the city. The battle was going better than expected. Krathul forces were surrendering in some areas, retreating in others. A few units were still fighting, but they were isolated and would be dealt with soon. "Ma'am, we have a situation," one of her officers said. "A large group of Krathul has barricaded themselves in the old government building. They have Valenti hostages." Kelly felt her jaw tighten. A hostage situation was the worst possible scenario. "How many hostages?" "We think about 50 civilians. Men, women, children." "And how many Krathul?" "Maybe 30 soldiers." Kelly looked at the building's layout on her display. It was a strong position, easy to defend. If they tried a direct assault, the hostages would probably be killed. She needed a different approach. "Get me a translator and an open channel to that building," she ordered. "And find me someone who knows about Krathul psychology. We're going to negotiate." 10 minutes later, Kelly was speaking through a loudspeaker to the Krathul inside the building. She had learned some things about their culture from the intelligence briefings. They valued honor and strength. They respected courage. "Krathul Commander, this is Major Kelly Price of Earth Forces. Your fleet is destroyed. Your ground forces are defeated. You have two choices: release the hostages and surrender, and you will be treated according to the rules of war. You will not be harmed. You will be fed and given medical care. Eventually, you will be returned to your people." There was silence for a moment, then a harsh voice replied, "And the second choice? You keep the hostages and we come in and get them. We have weapons that can tear that building apart. We have soldiers who can fight room to room. We will get those civilians out. But if we have to do it that way, none of you will survive." More silence. Kelly let it stretch out, let them think about it. She was bluffing about some of it. They couldn't just demolish the building, not with hostages inside. But she sold it with complete confidence. "How do we know you won't kill us anyway?" the Krathul commander finally asked. "Because unlike you, we follow rules," Kelly said coldly. "We don't kill prisoners. We don't murder civilians. That's the difference between us. You chose to be monsters. We chose to be soldiers." Another long pause. Then slowly, the doors to the building opened. Krathul soldiers began walking out, their hands raised. They looked defeated and exhausted. "All units hold fire," Kelly ordered. "Let them surrender. Medics, be ready to treat the hostages." The Valenti civilians stumbled out after the soldiers, blinking in the daylight. Many were crying. Some collapsed as soon as they were clear of the building. Human medics rushed forward to help them. One Krathul officer approached Kelly. He was tall, his armor scarred from fighting. "You are the commander?" "I am. You fought well. We have never encountered a species like yours." Kelly looked at him without sympathy. "You should have picked on someone your own size instead of defenseless civilians." The officer seemed to consider this. "Perhaps. But tell me, what are you called? What species fights with such intelligence and ferocity?" "We're called humans, and we come from a planet called Earth. Remember that name because you're going to be hearing it a lot more." 2 weeks had passed since the last shots were fired on Alara Prime. The Krathul were either dead, captured, or had escaped in the few ships that managed to flee the system. The planet was finally at peace, but the scars of war were everywhere. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in what had once been the central plaza of the Valenti capital city. Around him, work crews from both species labored to clear rubble and begin reconstruction. Human engineers worked alongside Valenti builders, sharing techniques and ideas. It should have been a moment of pure victory, but Jake felt the weight of command pressing down on him. "Admiral, the final casualty report is ready," said Commander Nicole Stevens, approaching with a data pad in her hands. Her face was tired, with dark circles under her eyes. She had been working almost non-stop since the battle ended. Jake took the pad and read through the numbers slowly. Each line represented lives lost, families broken, futures stolen. 147 dead, he said quietly. 412 wounded, with 63 of those critical. "Yes, sir. We lost 3 destroyers. The carrier Defiant took major damage, and a dozen smaller craft were destroyed." Jake thought about the memorial service they would hold back on Earth. He would have to read every single name aloud. He would have to look into the eyes of parents, spouses, and children who would never see their loved ones again. The weight of those 147 deaths would stay with him forever. "And the Valenti casualties?" he asked. Nicole's expression darkened. "Approximately 40,000 killed before we arrived. Another 8,000 died during the fighting, mostly from Krathul actions as they retreated. But sir, we saved over 3 million people. The estimates said the Krathul would have exterminated the entire population within another month. 3 million lives saved. Jake held on to that number like a lifeline. It had to mean something. It had to be worth the price his people had paid. I want full honors for our fallen, he said, and I want every family contacted personally. No form letters. They deserve better than that. Already arranged, sir. Captain Ben Walker has volunteered to personally visit the families of everyone from his ship who didn't make it home. Jake nodded. Ben was a good man, the kind of officer who understood that command meant carrying the weight of every decision. What about the wounded? How are they doing? Medical teams are working around the clock. Most will recover fully. Some will need months of rehabilitation. A few will never serve in combat again. The cost of war was never just the dead. It was the wounded, the traumatized, the ones who would wake up screaming from nightmares for years to come. Jake had seen it before in Earth's last conflicts. He knew what his people were facing. Make sure they have whatever support they need. Medical, psychological, financial, everything. Down in the temporary hospital that had been set up in a converted warehouse, Dr. Sophie Allen worked on her 36th patient of the day. She had been a trauma surgeon back on Earth, but nothing had quite prepared her for this. Human and alien biology were different enough to make treatment challenging. How is he doing? Asked a Valenti doctor named Kira, who had been working alongside Sophie since the hospital opened. Sophie checked the monitors connected to the young Marine on the bed. He had taken shrapnel from an explosion, and it had torn through his abdomen. She had spent 6 hours in surgery saving his life. He'll live. He'll need time to heal, but he'll make it. Kira looked at the medical equipment with fascination. Human technology was different from Valenti technology, but in many ways more advanced. Your people are very skilled at saving lives. We've had a lot of practice, Sophie said, a bitter edge to her voice. We spent thousands of years hurting each other. We got very good at patching people back together so they could go back to fighting. That sounds terrible. It was. It is. Sophie moved to wash her hands. But at least we learned something useful from all that horror. At least we can use that knowledge to help now. In another part of the hospital, a Valenti civilian named Elrin was helping to organize supplies. He had appointed himself as an unofficial liaison between the humans and his people. In the past 2 weeks, he had learned more about these strange aliens than he ever imagined possible. They were contradictions walking on 2 legs. They could be incredibly gentle, playing with Valenti children and helping elderly civilians with infinite patience. But he had also seen their combat footage, watched recordings of the battle. The same species that handed out food and medicine had destroyed a Krathul fleet with terrifying efficiency. Elrin, we need more blankets in Section 3, called out a human logistics officer named Sam Porter. I'll get them, Elrin replied in his improving English. He had been learning the human language, finding it rough but expressive. As he carried blankets through the hospital, he passed a room where a human soldier sat beside the bed of another soldier. The one in bed was missing a leg and the one sitting was holding his hand, talking quietly. Elrin couldn't hear the words, but he could see the pain in both their faces. These humans hurt like the Valenti hurt. They bled, they cried, they mourned their dead, but they kept working, kept helping, kept moving forward. At the prisoner of war camp outside the city, Major Kelly Price inspected the conditions. The captured Krathul soldiers were being held in prefabricated structures that provided shelter, food, and basic comfort. It wasn't luxurious, but it was humane. Any problems? She asked the camp commander, Lieutenant Ross Cooper. A few of them tried to escape yesterday, but we caught them without incident. Other than that, they've been cooperative. I think they're still in shock. Kelly walked along the fence line, looking at the alien prisoners. They looked back at her with expressions that might have been fear or respect or both. Have they asked any questions? Lots of them. Mostly they want to know why we're not executing them. Apparently the Krathul don't take prisoners. When they defeat an enemy, they eliminate them completely. Kelly felt disgust rise in her throat. That's not how we do things. Make sure they're fed properly and have access to medical care. When this is over, they'll be returned to their people. Some of the Valenti survivors aren't happy about that, ma'am. They want revenge for what was done to them. I understand that, but we're not going to become monsters just because we fought monsters. We have rules and we follow them. That's what makes us better. In the evening, Admiral Jake Morrison met with the Valenti leadership in a building that had been hastily repaired for the purpose. The Valenti Council of Elders sat across from him, their feathered heads moving in gestures he was learning to read. "Admiral Morrison, our people are grateful beyond words for what yours has done," said Elder Vina, who seemed to be the leader. "You saved our civilization from extinction. How can we ever repay such a debt?" Jake shook his head. "You don't owe us anything. We didn't come here for payment or reward. We came because it was the right thing to do. But you lost your own people saving ours. Surely that requires compensation. The families of the fallen will be taken care of by our own government. We don't want anything from you except your recovery and survival." The Valenti elders looked at each other in confusion. This concept seemed foreign to them. Every species they knew operated on trade and mutual benefit. These humans had traveled across the stars, fought a war, and lost their own people, all for strangers they had never met. "Why?" Elder Vina finally asked. "Please help us understand. Why would your species do this?" Jake thought about how to explain it in a way they would understand. "On Earth, we have a long and violent history. We fought each other for thousands of years. We got very good at warfare, at destruction, at killing. But eventually we realized something important. All that strength, all that power, it was meaningless unless we used it for something good." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city being rebuilt. "We decided that being strong meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. We decided that having power meant taking responsibility. When we heard your distress call, we had a choice. We could hide and stay safe, or we could risk everything to help people we didn't know. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one. Your people are very strange," Elder Vina said softly, "but perhaps the galaxy needs such strangeness." That night, Captain Ben Walker sat alone in his quarters on the Valiant, writing letters to the families of the crew members who had died under his command. Each letter was personal, filled with specific memories and details about the person they had lost. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, but they deserved nothing less. He wrote about Lieutenant Danny Hayes, the fighter pilot who had died ramming his damaged craft into a Krathul weapons platform to save his wingmates. He wrote about Ensign Katie Moore, who had been killed when her station exploded during the battle. He wrote about Chief Engineer Tom Bradley, who had stayed at his post keeping the engines running even as the ship was damaged around him, and who had died when a conduit ruptured. Each letter took an hour to write. Each one made him remember a face, a laugh, a moment of friendship. By the time he finished, the sun was rising over Alara Prime, painting the scarred landscape in shades of gold and pink. 3 months after the Battle of Alara Prime, Captain Laura Hayes stood in the Grand Assembly Hall on the neutral station of Crossroads. The station floated in space between several star systems, serving as a meeting place for different species. Today, it was hosting something that had never happened before, a formal diplomatic conference between Earth and the other civilizations of this region of the galaxy. The hall was filled with representatives from a dozen different species. Some looked almost human. Others were so alien that Laura had trouble understanding their body language. All of them were watching the humans with a mixture of curiosity and fear. "The session will now begin," announced the station administrator, a crystalline being named Vox, who served as neutral mediator. "We are here to discuss the recent actions of the species known as humanity and their place in the galactic community." President Helen Carter stepped forward to address the assembly. She had traveled from Earth specifically for this meeting, knowing how important it was. Behind her stood Admiral Jake Morrison and several other human representatives, all in formal dress uniforms. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," Helen began. "I know our arrival in galactic affairs has been sudden and perhaps unsettling. I want to address your concerns directly and honestly." A representative from the Miran species raised a crystalline appendage. The Miran were a peaceful civilization that had been trading with other species for thousands of years. "President Carter, we have reviewed the combat data from Alara Prime. Your military capabilities are far beyond what we expected from a newly emerged species. Many of us are concerned about your intentions." Helen nodded, expecting this question. "I understand your fear. Let me be clear about what humanity is and what we're not. We are not conquerors. We don't want to rule anyone or take anyone's territory, but we are warriors. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other on our home world. We got very good at violence." A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. Some shifted nervously in their seats, But we also learned something from all that fighting, Helen continued. We learned that war is terrible. We learned that violence destroys more than it creates. Most importantly, we learned that strength without purpose is just cruelty. So we made a choice as a species. We decided to use our strength to protect instead of to conquer. An ambassador from a species called the Torvak spoke up. The Torvak were gray-skinned humanoids who had suffered attacks from the Krathul in the past. You speak of protection, but why should we believe you? Every powerful species in the galaxy claims peaceful intentions until they become strong enough to take what they want. Admiral Jake Morrison stepped forward. Because we're putting our actions where our words are. We're making a formal proposal to this assembly. Any species that faces military aggression from another power can call on Earth for protection. We won't ask for payment. We won't demand territory or resources. We'll simply help those who need help. The assembly erupted in discussion. Species who had lived in fear of aggressive empires for generations couldn't believe what they were hearing. It seemed too good to be true. The Moran ambassador's crystalline form flickered with emotion. You would defend others without asking for anything in return? That goes against every principle of galactic politics we understand. Maybe that's the problem, Helen said quietly. Maybe galactic politics needs to change. On Earth, we have a saying, with great power comes great responsibility. We're one of the most dangerous species you've encountered, and we know it. That means we have a responsibility to use that danger properly. A small furry being from the Pella species spoke up nervously. But what stops you from becoming the very thing you claim to fight against? Power corrupts. What happens when you grow tired of protecting and decide to rule? It was a fair question, and Helen had thought about it many times. Nothing stops us except ourselves. We have to make the choice every single day to be better than our worst impulses. But that's true of any species, isn't it? The difference is we're willing to admit we're dangerous and work to control. Captain Laura Hayes watched the debate unfold and thought about the people back on Earth. Regular citizens who had watched the news from Alara Prime with tears in their eyes. People who had sent care packages to the Valenti refugees. Children who had drawn pictures to send to the survivors. Humanity wasn't perfect, but they were trying to be better than they had been. The Valenti representative stood up. It was Elder Vina, who had traveled from Alara Prime to speak at this conference. I can answer the question about humanity's intentions. I have lived among them for 3 months. I have watched how they treat my people. The assembly fell silent listening. The humans could have taken anything they wanted from us, Vina said. We were helpless, our cities destroyed, our people scattered. They could have made demands, asked for resources, claimed our world as their own. Instead, they asked for nothing. They gave us food, medicine, and help rebuilding. Their engineers work alongside our builders. Their doctors train our medical staff. They treat us as equals, not as conquered people or charity cases. Vina's voice grew stronger. And yes, they are dangerous. I have seen what their weapons can do. I have watched recordings of the battle and felt fear at their efficiency in combat. But I have also seen their soldiers share their meals with our children. I have seen their doctors cry when they lose a patient. They are capable of great violence, but they are also capable of great kindness. The Miran ambassador was quiet for a long moment. The question remains, what do you want from us? From the galactic community? Helen looked around at all the different species represented in the hall. We want to be part of something larger than ourselves. We want allies, friends, trading partners. We want to learn from species who have been exploring space longer than we have. And we want to offer our protection to those who need it. You mentioned a formal proposal, said the Torvak ambassador. Explain exactly what you mean. Admiral Jake Morrison pulled up a holographic display. We're proposing a mutual defense agreement. Any signatory species that comes under military attack can send a distress signal to Earth. We will respond with military force if needed. In return, we ask only for permission to maintain small monitoring stations in your systems, so we can respond quickly to threats. And if we don't sign this agreement? Someone asked. Then nothing changes, Helen said simply. We're not going to force anyone to accept our help. But the offer will stand. If you need us, we'll come. Over the next several hours, the debate continued. Some species were immediately interested. Others were cautious. A few were openly hostile to the idea. But slowly a consensus began to form. Finally, the Moran ambassador spoke again. I propose we allow individual species to make their own decisions about this agreement. Those who wish to accept Earth's offer may do so. Those who prefer to remain neutral can do that as well. But I think we should also extend formal recognition to humanity as a member of the galactic community. The vote was not unanimous, but it passed. Earth was now officially recognized as a spacefaring civilization, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. After the session ended, Laura found herself standing at an observation window, looking out at the stars. She was joined by a young Valenti she had met before, a civilian named Elrin who now worked as a translator. "Do you think they trust us?" Laura asked. Elrin made a gesture that might have been a shrug. "Some do, some don't. Trust has to be earned. But you gave them something they haven't had in a long time. What's that? Hope. For generations, peaceful species have lived in fear of aggressive empires. They knew that being weak meant being a target. But now there's someone willing to stand up for them. That changes everything." Laura thought about the memorial back on Earth, where the names of 147 fallen soldiers were carved into stone. "I hope we can live up to their expectations. I hope the price we paid means something." "It does," Elrin said firmly. "Every Valenti child who will grow up because your people fought for them. Every family that wasn't destroyed. Every city that will be rebuilt. That's what the price means." Back on Earth in the unified government headquarters, President Helen Carter addressed the world. The broadcast went out to every nation, every city, every home. Today, humanity took its place among the stars not as conquerors, but as protectors. We made a promise to the galaxy that we will use our strength to defend those who cannot defend themselves. This will not be easy. It will cost us resources, time, and potentially more lives. But it's the right thing to do. She paused, looking directly into the camera. For too long, we used our intelligence and creativity to hurt each other. We built weapons of terrible power and used them against ourselves. But we learned from those mistakes. We grew, we changed. Now we have a chance to use everything we learned. All that knowledge of warfare and violence for something good. In living rooms across Earth, people watched and listened. Some were proud. Some were worried. Some were grieving for loved ones who had died at Alara Prime. But most understood that humanity had reached a turning point. "We are the monsters of Earth," Helen continued. "We're dangerous, creative, and capable of terrible violence. But we choose to be more than that. We choose to be protectors.